Before history spoke the name Shaka Zulu like thunder, another name was gathering the storm, Dingiswayo. In the mist of KwaZulu-Natal, a fugitive steps into the Mthethwa camp. The king does not ask where he has come from, he asks who he can become. A hand pulls him back from a waiting blade, sets a shield in his grip, drills a silence into his breath. The man we forget shapes the legend we remember. If Shaka is the blade, Dingiswayo is the whetstone. If Shaka is thunder, Dingiswayo is the sky. This is our thesis. Without Dingiswayo, Shaka might have remained a wandering spear rather than the storm that would be called Zulu. And because every act of patronage writes its debt, somewhere at the edge of the map a pressure begins to move. Zwide kaLanga, a shadow sharpening toward night. A single decision by Dingiswayo set KwaZulu-Natal on a different chessboard. When Shaka Zulu stood at the threshold of the Mthethwa camp, every possibility hung on a breath. Turned away, he might vanish into an anonymous clash of spears or be hunted down by hostile bands. Taken in, he would be folded into drill and drum, into a network already tuned to command. The fate of one man, in that instant, was not merely his own. It was weight placed on the axle of history, where one choice opens a century of consequences. Dingiswayo knew the Mthethwa Confederacy was not a stone-walled empire but a fabric woven from oaths, ritual, and consent. Admitting Shaka meant pouring new vigor into age-grade regiments, sharpening a discipline that favored speed over slaughter, and most of all testing whether a discarded mind could become a thinking blade. At the rim of the map, pressure was hardening. The Ndwandwe under Zwide kaLanga, a counterforce that refused absorption into the Mthethwa orbit, a will like cold steel searching for the seam. Refuse, and Zwide could pinch out every spark of reform, except in Dingiswayo wagers that the right man can turn discipline into power and a web into endurance. The stakes are not a tally of battles, but the direction a region will flow. Either history folds along Zwide kaLanga's blade, or it opens to the drum that Dingiswayo is weaving, giving Shaka time to learn the cadence before he leads it. To understand that breath, we return to Dingiswayo's beginning. The Mthethwa Confederacy was not a fortress of stone, but a fabric woven from homesteads and lineages, tightened by oaths, ritual, tribute, and consent. Authority here did not roar, it negotiated. A leader rose by stitching people to purpose, by standing at the crossroads of custom and need. Dingiswayo's path, exile, return, and claim taught him that power survives not by spectacle but by agreement. He governed like a weaver, not a hammer, drawing strands together until they held. Justice moved through ritual more often than through punishment. Disputes brought to cattle kraals at dusk, elders listening for the thread of truth, settlements that restored balance rather than carved scars. A confederacy like this breathes. It requires patience, and Dingiswayo learned to cultivate that patience the way a farmer watches the sky, trusting rain yet preparing for drought. Discipline redraws maps faster than blades. Where others trusted to fury, Dingiswayo trained cadence. The Amabutho moved as if a single body, shields breathing in and out, feet learning distance as a sense rather than a number. Raids became purposeful rather than wasteful, speed replacing slaughter, cohesion replacing noise. The lesson was simple and hard order before victory, restraint before glory, yet it carried farther than any boast. In the quiet of drill, a confederacy discovered its heartbeat. By firelight, junior leaders rehearsed signals with knotted grass and scored sticks. At dawn, they turned sketches into motion on the scrub lines folding, points flexing, a discipline that could travel across hills faster than a messenger's sprint. And then history delivered a recruit unlike any other. He arrived roughened by rejection, a mind too sharp to sit safely in the scabbard. Shaka did not ask for pity. He asked for a chance to be measured. Dingiswayo gave him more than shelter. He enlisted him, tested him, and raised him to command men. A unit to lead, a patron willing to gamble, these are the twin doors through which a commander walks. Under Mthethwa eyes, Shaka learned the weight of a shield, the economy of a short thrust, the patience to close the space no one wants to cross. Nothing miraculous, nothing sudden, only the furnace of repetition where iron remembers heat. The man who would later standardize and scale first learned to listen to cadence and to carry consent. He learned to hold a line steady through insult, to collect information like water along a lip of rock, and to recognize when a rumor held the weight of intent. The path is set, but not secure. The night of Zwide will test everything. Before the field speaks, let us listen to how the people remember. History is not only written, it is sung. The mist over KwaZulu-Natal lifts and a single voice rises, carrying names like embers cupped in both hands. They call him Dingiswayo, weaver of spears, shepherd of regiments, the wind that turns tall grass to one direction. He walks without a crown, but the homesteads lean toward him. He speaks in scattered fires, remember they belong to the same night. He is the path where feet learn to keep time. He is the hand that steadies a shield. He is the patient rain before the storm. In the chorus that answers, you can hear Shaka named not as a legend already made, but as a blade being tempered, a man under discipline, a promise under watch. The song rolls his name like a drumhead, Shaka. Shaka yet never forgets the palm that taught the drum to hold its shape. Praise does not erase complexity. It domesticates fear. It tells a community that order can be chosen, that violence can be bounded, that a king's strongest weapon is not the spear, but the agreement that keeps the spear sheathed until it must be drawn. Songs remember rhythm better than minutes, and honor better than sequence. They bend time so a worthy deed can stand taller. They curve the road so a lesson can be seen. Long after the fires go out, collectors arrive with notebooks and lanterns, writing by the light they carry. Their pages preserve and distort at once. A king becomes a myth, a victory becomes a sign, a silence becomes an absence. Oral tradition is a river. To scoop it into a jar is to change its shape. Colonial memoir is a mirror. To look through it is to see the world bent around the gaze. Modern scholarship weighs both jars and mirrors, sifting for a line that does not break when tested. Between voice and page, we choose to walk with care, to mark what is fact, what is inference, what remains contested, and to keep listening. Let the praise poem do what only it can do. Carry breath across generations, bind the names of Dingiswayo and Shaka in a rope of respect, remind us that a confederacy lives first in the mouth before it lives on a map. From song to barracks where ideas become formations. Under Dingiswayo's eye, Shaka is not given destiny. He is given a unit, a bounded space in which failure has consequence and success has witnesses. The Amabutho he leads learn to advance with shields like a single ribcage, to hold breath at the edge of terror, to shorten the swing of the arm until the thrust is clean. The short-stabbing spear Iklua does not arrive as a miracle. It arrives as a habit, tested in close, refined by repetition, later to be standardized when Shaka carries command in his own name. Here, under Mthethwa discipline, the furnace is lit. He measures distance by footfall, patience by how long he can keep silence, authority by how quickly a line closes when he asks it to. Dingiswayo does not script glory for him. He hands him the grammar of it, so that when glory comes, it will have a language to speak. Beyond the drill, Shaka studies terrain the way a hunter studies wind, how a line moves differently through reed beds than across hardpan, how a slope steals speed from a charge, how dust carries sound and tells on the careless. He learns to borrow time by fainting with a handful of men, to earn it back by arriving where no one expects a full line to fit. Power also lives where no spear is lifted. Night after night, the map warms along quiet corridors. Visits to homesteads that need protection, oaths renewed with meat and beer, disputes settled before they grow teeth. Dingiswayo prefers adhesion to annihilation, drawing neighbors into the Mthethwa orbit by advantage and honor tribute balanced by shelter, ritual answered by steadiness. The web strengthens, each knot a conversation rather than a conquest. And yet, at the far edge of this fabric, a stiffness resists the weave. The Ndwandwe under Zwide kaLanga do not bend toward absorption. They are a counter-design, a rival rhythm, a blade held crosswise against the loom. Dingiswayo does not mistake refusal for silence. He reads it as pressure and prepares accordingly, not by shouting louder but by making the rest of the fabric hold. He cultivates messengers who can run between storms, headmen whose dignity is armor, interpreters who can turn insult into a path back to respect. Then the field asks for proof. A small engagement opens like a lesson written in dust. The center is fixed shields planted, feet braced while the flanks feel for air, sliding along scrub and shadow. Hand signs, a tilt of a head, a low call that carries just far enough. Speed where the enemy expects noise, patience where they expect fury. What later tales will name the horns of the bull is not yet doctrine. It is instinct, a way of thinking in curves instead of lines. Shaka leads inside the space he has been allowed to shape, and men answer him because the body answers when cadence is true. There is no spectacle, only geometry closing with intent, dust rising in deliberate arcs, the rip of breath when distance disappears and training takes over. When the line settles and the ground stops shaking, The lesson is written not in blood but in order. Cohesion outlives chaos. Prisoners are counted, not paraded, and the wounded are arranged for decision. Mercy is weighed against message, and discipline decides who lives to carry a warning, who is kept to carry a burden. Word travels faster than hoofbeat. In the camps that night, men speak of how a unit moved like a thought made visible, how a commander asked for an inch and used it to take a field. Dingiswayo listens without praise. Consent is the drum that must be kept taut, and every victory risks stretching it out of tune. He keeps the web close, tightens the knots, watches the horizon. Somewhere beyond the last homestead light, Zwide kaLanga begins to move across the Mthethwa, not as rumor but as intent. The hunt begins, and with it the demand to tell this story without flattery or fear. Before the blades ring, we pause to measure the dust that clings to every account, the bias that gathers on every telling, and we weigh what can be known against what must be admitted as uncertain. Colonial diaries count days with a steady hand, but their ink often chooses a side. Oral tradition guards motive and meaning, yet it bends time to fit the curve of memory. Modern scholarship stands between them, weighing jars of river water against mirrors that reflect the holder's face. We walk this ground with care. When the path is firm, Dingiswayo's patronage of Shaka, the Confederate nature of Mthethwa, we call it fact and move. When the path is traced by pattern Dingiswayo, granting room for tactical trial, the early shape of close-in shock, we mark it as inference and keep testing. When the path splits circumstances around Dingiswayo's capture and death, the exact cadence by which tactics congealed into doctrine, we admit it is contested and proceed with humility. This is not an interruption of the story, but its ethic. To let feeling stand on clear ground, to let awe be disciplined by evidence. Hold that discipline now as the horizon darkens. And Zwide kaLanga, his knife is already out. Night gathers over the Mthethwa and the rumor hardens into movement. Riders trace the reed beds. Scouts return with the same word shaped by different mouths. Zwide kaLanga is coming. Then the blade leaves the sheath, and legend bleeds first. Around 1817, Dingiswayo is taken, some say in parley, others in pursuit. The particulars are contested, the outcome is not. The banner that drew homesteads into one wind dips and does not rise. In the camps, the hum of oath and levy falters. Lines that once tightened at a signal loosen into panic. Mthethwa does not crumble in spectacle. It buckles like a woven bridge when a single beam is cut. Men scatter to kin and hills, to allies and luck. What a king stitched together with ritual and consent can, in a night, be taught the price of its own delicacy. Smoke holds the names of places that never learned to write themselves, and the river learns a new color, and the map blinks where trust used to live. Power abhors a vacuum, but it does not fill on its own. Into the emptied center steps Shaka, not as a miracle, but as the one already standing at the hinge. He gathers the remnants of Mthethwa companies that still answer to cadence, headmen who still respect the drum, and draws them beneath the name Zulu. He does not begin from zero. He inherits men trained to move as one, routes of message and tribute that outlived the shock, habits of obedience that can be tuned to a new pitch. What had been experiments under another's eye he now standardizes. What had been instinct he turns into doctrine. What had been a web he hardens into a frame. Regiments are reformed, shields are measured, distances are taught as law. The map warms again, not as a soft glow of consent alone, but as a braid of consent and enforcement. A promise that keeps its shape because it is bound to consequence. Patterns settle. Insignia to mark regiments so a commander can speak to 1,000 men at once. Watch lines along the Mthethwa so rumor must run uphill. Levy cycles that make hunger an ally and waste an enemy. From the ridgelines, the story looks simple. A fall and a rise. Inside the dust, it is continuity passing through rupture, Dingiswayo's patient weave retied under Shaka's hand. Allies return because a place has been prepared for them. Warriors stand because their feet remember the drill. The ascent that follows will be called many things. Genius, brutality, inevitability, but its first motion is recognition. A standard tumbles, another rises, and the wind does not have to change direction to fill it. So, who made Shaka the man born to command? Or the king who made command possible? Verdict comes without trumpet, like a tide that has already turned. Dingiswayo is not the architect of every reform. He is the architect of conditions. He chooses discipline where spectacle would be easier, alliance where annihilation would be cleaner, consent where coercion would be quicker. Under his hand, the Mthethwa Confederacy learns to breathe in time, custom and ritual steadying the ribs, consent deepening the lung, force reserved for the moment when order itself must be defended. Into that air steps Shaka, and what he does is what empires remember. He standardizes the useful, scales the workable, brands the familiar until it becomes a shape the world can see. The short stabbing spear becomes law rather than experiment. The cadence of advance becomes doctrine rather than instinct. The web of obligations becomes a frame whose joints no longer creak. But none of this floats in a vacuum. Men follow because they have learned to follow. Roots hold because they have been walked. Drums keep pitch because someone tuned them before the storm. Call it a startup if you must. Dingiswayo is the early investor and the accelerator. He supplies runway, mentorship, and the first real customers a Mabutho that already know how to move. Headmen who already trust the drum, a network already practiced in tribute and protection. Shaka is the scaling CEO. He hardens prototypes into product, builds process around talent, and pushes the ceiling until it becomes floor. Remove the investor and the launch looks different. Remove the accelerator and scale looks impossible. This does not diminish Shaka. It defines what he made from what he was given, and it restores Dingiswayo to the place his patience earned. The legitimacy meter, if you could watch it over years rather than scenes, would show a relay rather than a rupture. Dingiswayo raising consent and ritual to survivable heights, Shaka taking that altitude and adding standardization and force until the silhouette of Zulu power stands on the horizon with its own weather. So, who made Shaka? The answer refuses a single name. Genius without a stage is a rumor. A stage without a performer is an empty promise. Dingiswayo built the stage and kept the lamps lit long enough for a fugitive to arrive. Shaka stepped under that light and filled it. The justice we owe the past is to see both acts in one motion. The weaver setting the loom, and the hand that pulls the cloth tight. The story closes with quiet, not silence. Dingiswayo's patience still hangs in the air, and Shaka Zulu's standard holds the wind. If this has shown you how a kingmaker makes a king, follow the trail we're laying. The reed beds along the Mlathus are darkening. Hoofbeats carry a name that cuts like a blade. Next, we walk into the country of the Ndwandwe and face the pressure that tempered them both, Zwide kaLanga, the kingbreaker who forged his own enemy. Follow Zulu Saga, the rivals.